Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our Week 16 preview for props in DFS tomorrow. Gotta make sure you have all the info you need to go out there and make your Christmas Eve a profitable one. And first off, just gonna say happy holidays to everyone out there. Hopefully you're enjoying some time with your family. It's the best time of the year, whether you celebrate, whether you're just watching football this weekend. Should be a fun one. So go out there, enjoy it, spend that time with family if you're celebrating, and let's go out there and have ourselves a weekend. For this video, we're going to take a look at the DFS side of things, a few stacks that you might want to attack for GPPs to try and get you some correlation heading into those contests to try and spike some of that top end upside. And then for our prop exposure, going to take a look at Underdog and on Prize Picks and bring you a few props you might want to get to yourself. So a lot to get into here. It's the holidays. Got to get this in here quickly. Let's go ahead and hop right on in. We've got three sneaky stacks that I think are going under-owned here. And first off, we've got a tough matchup against the Cowboys defense, but you've got a Tua-led offense that if they have Tyreek Hill for, are always going to be dangerous. And just for evidence of the type of shootouts you can see with the Cowboys, take a look at that Seahawks game, right? Geno Smith absolutely went off against them, and Tua has a lot more efficient offense than what they were dealing with. So if they can do it, of course the Dolphins can. So it's $7,800 and only 5.4% ownership. I thought you're going to see 10, maybe 15% on both of these top tier quarterbacks. And while Dak is getting a little bit more attention than Tua, I would argue that Tua has proven to be the easier to stack quarterback. Not only do you have really easy to predict production, right? We know that Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are going to carry at least half of that offensive yardage. A lot of times it's closer to 65, 70%. And when you're trying to go out there, attack a core set of players, it makes it real easy to just get over the field on those three. So I like that. I like the fact that he's lower owned than the other side with Dak. And in general, this should be a shootout, right? You have two of the most productive offenses in the league, though they are competent on the defensive side of the ball. I'm expecting these offenses to take over. And if that were to happen, what is one of the highest totals on the entire slate might go well over that sort of metric. So that's what we're looking for with the stack, right? We want lower ownership spots. We can go out there and get leverage to the field. And most importantly, right, we want to attack high scoring, highly competitive games, which all metrics here are kind of pointing towards that. So I like that out there. In terms of your stacking options, you're really going to have to spend up at wide receiver. Both Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb are over $9,000, which isn't something we see all that often. And if you're going to go out there, take two premium players, well, they're really going to make you spend up for it, right? On top of what is already an expensive quarterback at $7,800. So maybe that's why the ownership's going to stay a little bit lower. But with all the injuries we have here in week 16, there's going to be plenty of value to be had, right? We have Ezekiel Elliott at running back. That's a pretty solid value. We have a few pretty much min-price wide receivers that are going to be playing as a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver this week. You're going to have the flexibility in terms of salary to make these lineups work. So it's a premium stack. You're spending a whole lot for this kind of lineup, but you can definitely make it work. In terms of salary saving options, I mean, Dalton Schultz, shouldn't say Dalton Schultz, Durham Smythe, got a little ahead of myself there. It's a pretty solid option, right? He's not projecting through the roof, but does have that red zone upside. If you look at some of the tertiary wide receivers, there are a few guys you could get to, like a Michael Gallup, right? You could save a little bit of salary getting to Gallup. Where is he? Down here at what, $3,200? Even at running back, if you wanted to take like a Rico Dowdle, right, he would be a little bit cheaper than a lot of the other options. I don't think you have to get that creative, right? You can take some of the premier options in this stack. I prefer the elites, right? I prefer getting to, Jake Ferguson at tight end rather than a Durham Smythe. I want to take those top 2 wide receivers as much as humanly possible, and probably using some of my one-offs or even, one-off of one team versus another, like a little mini stack, right, of one player from each team to go out there and save salary, right? Whether it's one of those value running backs that we're likely to have, whether it's, somebody at the wide receiver position that's the min salary, you can make the premium stacks work, and those are the ones that I prefer out there. Next up, we've got ourselves this Jared Goff stack versus the Vikings. This game is, I think, a low-key sneaky matchup that might go out there and go over a 50-point total. You're looking at a decent points per dollar value out there with Jared Goff, but on top of that, just a ton of weapons to pair him up with, right? Whether it's on his team with Laporta, you got both running backs, given Montgomery, you've got St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, you could go out there and deploy Jamison Williams, right? You could throw out there for a long shot. And then on the other side of the ball, you got Justin Jefferson, Hawkinson, Addison, Ty Chandler, who looked like an absolute beast out there last week in terms of buybacks. So Jared Goff, relatively low owned. He's the lowest owned of these three quarterbacks at just 3.6%, though he is a little bit expensive. That's why I think all three of these quarterbacks are a little bit lower owned than they should be. You just have so many stacking options that you can get the job done, right? At tight end, both of these tight ends aren't that bad in terms of ownership. Sam Laporta is exceptionally low owned at only 3.3%. At wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, right, getting the attention they deserve. But if you're looking to get different, just go to one of the number 2 wide receivers, right? Josh Reynolds, Jordan Addison are both relatively low owned. Let's see, where's Josh Reynolds for you guys? He's relatively cheap on this slate too, Reynolds. Probably passed him here, didn't I? Let's see, maybe a little bit more expensive. Oh, I must not have had him on the sheet here as a yes. He's definitely in my player pool. I'm taking Josh Reynolds this week, but he's another cheaper option that you can get to. At running back, they're a little bit expensive. I don't love them in this game. You know, Ty Chandler's a little bit chalky at 29%. Both the running backs for Detroit are, you know, expensive, right? $6,900, $7,000 for Jahmyr Gibbs. So I like them as one-offs. If you're looking to get exposure to this game, I think the running backs, you could even take one from each team and try and get some exposure there. But where I think the leverage is, and where I think maybe the slate breaking upside out there for GPPs is out there with this quarterback stack, right? And if you're going to go with the Minnesota side, a lot of people are going to play Nick Mullins stacks. You know, last week he was one of the players that we talked up and then went out there and absolutely smashed, right? And I mentioned that he had all those different targets around him. It looks like people have kind of caught on, right? Brock Purdy, he's been thriving with a lot of targets around him. And while I think he's still a decent play, he's like 4 or 5 times higher owned at quarterback than what you have here with Jared Goff. So, you know, in large field GPPs where you have to try and differentiate yourself, I think that spending up for a Jared Goff might be the way to get it done, right? And maybe Ty Chandler is your buyback and you're assuming that he's gobbling up a lot of the touchdown upside, right? That could be a way to differentiate yourself from the super chalky Nick Mullins stacks and try and find your own way to the optimal lineup. And now here with our last stack, it's going to be Kyler Murray going against the Chicago Bears. Another one of those high totals on the slate and another one of the lower owned options, right? Other side of the game, you've got Justin Fields, who is the highest owned quarterback on the slate. You get it, right? Rushing quarterbacks have absolutely torn apart this Cardinals defense. It's a high total game. Kyler Murray is a willing dance partner, right? Going to go out there and post a lot of points himself, but maybe it's the Kyler Murray side that you have to have, right? Justin Fields can go out there, vulture touchdowns from his wide receivers. And if you're looking to stack a game, you know, maybe Justin Fields is good as like a one-off. Maybe you add one wide receiver with the Justin Fields. But if you're going for a game stack, which is my preferred strategy for large field GPPs, the Kyler Murray side is a lot more attractive. There's no Marquise Brown out there, so you have Trey McBride essentially as the #1 wide receiver, right? I know he plays tight end, but he'll be getting a bulk of the targets out there tomorrow. And then you have a lot of scrubs and, you know, young players to fill it in. You got Michael Wilson, you have Rondale Moore, who's going to be catching the ball a little bit out there. James Conner, of course, out of the backfield. So the stacking options definitely aren't as sexy, right? That's why a lot of people are going to the Justin Fields side, maybe taking that one off, but it's just a lot of ownership out there, right? It's too much ownership, right, for me to feel comfortable out there getting that exposure. So for me, I'm taking the shot on the quote-unquote uglier side and just hoping that this high total game leads to a lot of scoring. On the other side of things, I think DJ Moore is a perfect buyback option. He's a little bit expensive on the slate, but as he should be with the production he's been posting. Like he would be a decent buyback at $6,900. Cole Kmet could be a buyback option as well, right over there at $4,400. I just think a lot of people are going to be tempted to take Justin Fields and probably aren't giving Kyler Murray the respect he deserves. He's looked a lot better than I think most expected coming back from injury. He does have some rushing upside, albeit a little bit less as they're being conservative with them after the injury. But still, at $6,400, you know, he's capable of posting a 25 bomb out there. bringing two of those cheap wide receivers along and getting himself to the optimal, right? Trey McBride, a little bit expensive at the tight end spot, but because Marquise Brown has been rolled out, their number 1 and number 2 wide receivers are super cheap, right? Look at this, Greg Dortch, right? He's still questionable as of right now, but he's only $4,000. Michael Wilson might be the number 1 wide receiver, right? Projects the best out of all the wide receivers. He's only $3,700, and then Rondale Moore down here is only $3,500. So if you're looking to save salary and then spend up for maybe some one-offs from that Miami versus Cowboys game, you can make it work, right? This kind of lineup construction is going to save you a lot of salary. And heck, if you wanted to use a Tyreek Hill versus a CeeDee Lamb as a little correlation, right, at the wide receiver position, maybe throw one at flex, you could make that work. That kind of lineup is going to fit in terms of salary. So it's interesting. It's a way to save some salary, get a little bit different to the field. And I think in that high total game environment is a spot that you should be looking to attack. And now for some props. So first off, over here on Underdog, we've got 3 props that bring some solid value to the board. So first off, the top 2 are juiced -135 and our favorite on Draftkings. DJ Moore going against a soft secondary in Arizona. And then you've got Jonathan Taylor playing a tough secondary, a tough defense against the run out there with the Falcons, but he's without Zach Moss, which means Jonathan Taylor is going to be getting pretty much all the rushing usage for the Colts. They're one of the rushing heavy teams in the NFL that'll run it 20-25 times a game, and Jonathan Taylor is one of your premier running backs. So I know he's coming back from injury, has not looked like the Jonathan Taylor of old yet, but now that he's getting a full workload, I don't really care if it's a solid defense, right? So you've got the sportsbook value on those 2 players, solid matchups, at least for DJ Moore, solid situation, we should say, out there for Jonathan Taylor, and then this DK Metcalf prop, I actually took it at 61.5 yards. I don't know why it's bumping down. It's a super soft matchup against the Titans, right? They're a bottom 8 defense against opposing wide receivers. And then on top of that, it's a must-win game, right? If they have any chance at making the playoffs, they're going to go out there and pretty much have to run the table. Geno Smith should be back at quarterback. It might end up being Drew Lock again, but in either scenario, I'm okay with it, right? Drew Lock looked pretty damn solid last week. A DK Metcalf had 70 receiving yards on the last drive. Up until that point, only had 8 receiving yards. In fact, he had his over the last time that he played, and I was really not feeling all that good about it. That last drive, he showed exactly what he's capable of. I don't know why he wasn't getting the targets. Maybe the defense was really just focusing on him, but Jackson Smith and Jigba, you had Tyler Lockett go out there and burn the defense. Teams aren't going to be able to just focus in on DK Metcalf anymore, right? There's 3 legit wide receivers out there, and the one that has the most upside, right, is going to get the longest targets, is going to cash in, a lot of yak, is DK Metcalf, right? He's the most athletic, he's the most skilled out of the bunch. So to have players like Lockett, who's still at like 50.5 yards, Jackson Smith and Jigba is close to a 40-yard projection, I just vehemently disagree with it, right? DK Metcalf has much higher upside and is going to be getting the same, if not a larger target share out there. So again, I took him at 61.5 yards and I felt really good about that. He was -135 odds when I took that prop earlier. Now that he's been bumped down 3 yards, at least for me, I don't really understand why the unders are coming in. I'd be smacking the over there. So maybe it's weather-based. I have taken a look at a few projections. It looks like there's a slight chance of weather out there on Sunday, but it's like a sub 20% chance of precipitation. So if maybe that's the slight reason for the slight bump down here, but either way, I like all 3 props. And with the 6x payout over here in Underdog, you're getting pretty solid value there too. And now for prize picks, where I have 2 overs for a combo TD prop, which I hardly ever play these combos. A lot of times they're negative EV, but in the scenario here with these 2 props, they're both actually plus EV when you look at the odds. So if you're looking at sportsbook odds like DraftKings, FanDuel, like all the major books, and you're trying to take a look at the odds for these, you're doing it wrong, right? Those props have, a lot of VIG on them. You're not getting nearly as good odds as you should for an anytime touchdown prop. And the way to really calculate your true odds is to go to a site like Pinnacle where they have the option for the under. Those are the books that have the most accurate odds for an anytime TD. And what I did for calculating the odds here, what I usually do when I'm looking at a combo prop, is I'll take a look at the no side of things on Pinnacle, remove the VIG, and then calculate the EV of each prop. And in the case of both of these, they have over a 57.5 hit rate in terms of its percentage. And if you go out there and you were using like the sportsbook odds, like DraftKings, FanDuel, and whatnot, I know it would tell you that these have like a 70% chance of hitting, which is ludicrous. It's because of all that, tax they're essentially putting in with each prop that you're taking. And even if you use the most conservative projections, right? Like I said, Pinnacle, very conservative out there with their projections, you're still getting like a 56% hit rate on both of these. So these two tight ends, right? The Laporta Hawkinson prop, that's one of the higher totals on the slate. And then down here with the McBride versus Moore prop, that's also one of the higher totals, right? We talked about both games as potential stacks for DFS. So in a high total game, two guys on each side that are really some of the better touchdown scorers, right? Some of the more prominent players in the red zone for all of these teams in a high total scenario makes it a prop that I was willing to get to. And like I said, these combos aren't usually my favorite spots, but I do my due diligence, right? I'll go through them, at least check out what we're getting offered. And this week, these two especially caught my eye. So for a little 3x card over here in Prize Picks, that is what I ended up going with there. But of course, for all the different exposure I'm getting to, all of my player pool and projections that you saw in DFS, make sure to check out my Patreon. On there, I'm going to be posting all the different props I'm taking on both of these prop sites, and there'll be a lot more to come here tomorrow. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Week 16 preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead, smash that like button, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the content to come. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to try and put out a little piece of content for the Monday slate. We've got 3 games, so I'll try and put out some sort of DFS and prop preview for you guys, but it's Christmas Eve, so going to try and do that early before I got to go out there and hang with the family for the weekend. But like I mentioned off the bat, happy holidays to everyone out there. Hopefully you're enjoying all the time with your family and can go out there and make this weekend with the football just a little cherry on top of all of that. So I'm looking forward to it, guys. Best time of the year, like I said. Go out there, enjoy your weekend, and let's go out there and have ourselves a slate.